All right, in this video, what we're going to do is we're going to try to tackle portraits. And sorry again for the blue kind of cast here. I've downloaded the camera utility software and it doesn't seem to want to install, so I can't adjust the white balance, so you have to put up with the blue. But so what we're going to do is portraits, and I've got a provided image to start off with. We're going to do this just kind of together, and then you're going to be able to choose your own portrait to draw. And in this case, though, she's looking straight at us. She's very symmetrical, and her hair is long and straight. I think that's going to be easiest. I would much rather draw a female because they have a little softer features. We don't have quite as much shading to do to start off with. Straight hair I think is easier to do than curly hair, and long hair is I think a little bit easier than short. So it seems like maybe a bald guy would be easier, but I think it isn't as much. Kind of presents some other shading issues. But there's a bunch of different ways to do this as well, and this is only one way. If you want to check out somebody else, Andrew Loomis is a really good way of doing it, especially if you're going to go from 3/4 view and like from the side. But in this case, I think this will get us started. So initially, let's get to her head is pretty much an oval. So as I start off here, I do this in class is I put a little mark at about 2 fingers down and about 3 fingers up from the bottom of the page, and that way it gives me a little bit of room to put some shoulders and neck so they don't have a floating head. So a lot of times I even hold my pencil differently. I hold it like this for this stage, so I can get freedom here. My arm is moving, and it may not be a perfect circle here, may not be a perfect oval at the moment. Now, so this one obviously is the outlier. Again, like we were talking earlier, the more you do something, the average is usually correct. So, you know, I have an outlier here. I can erase that a little bit later on. What commonly happens, though, is that you don't draw a good line to begin with, and then you erase it all. And then when you go and draw it again, you do almost the same thing. So I would suggest that that you do a better line, draw the corrected line first, and if that's better, then I can erase this portion that's not right, and then you can reevaluate and say, okay, it still needs to come out here. But drawing light is key, and already in my in-class students, they're drawing super dark, and then there's just no way to ever erase that. So you can't become emotionally attached to these lines because we are going to erase a lot, and most of this stuff is going to go away. So knowing that, you've got to draw really light. Okay. So what we got here now is everything is going to be based upon the eyes. So it's really super important that we get them the right size and the right place. So I'm going to divide this page in half at the moment. Now, sometimes it's kind of hard to do that, so I turn my paper, and I think that already my line is not exactly in the center. So I want to correct that right now because it's going to lead to problems all the way down the line. So notice that didn't take very much erasing because I drew really light. Okay. So now, after we do that, we establish that. I like to establish like a center line as well, and we'll get to that. Now, the next part is I'm just going to establish where the center is, and so I can take my pencil, like if this was the image, and I can't do that right here. If I put the tip of my pencil at the what I think is the center, and then I mark it with my thumb, and I can tell if it's exactly in the center if these two pieces equal each other. Now I could use a ruler if I wanted to, but my pencil is probably going to be good enough. If let's say I had my center line right here, and I do the test, I put the pencil on the top of where I think is the center and my thumb here, and then I move it up here, and well, if it's not equal, then if there's more up here or less up here, then I know I'm not in the middle. So that's pretty close right there in the middle. Then I'm going to divide that area in half, and I want to know where that what feature comes at halfway between the top of the eyes and the bottom of the chin. Now notice though that this is the top of the eyes, not the middle of the eyes, not and everybody's going to be a little different. These are guidelines, okay? So we divide that in half, and sometimes I think it's easier to divide a straight line than it is to figure out where this curve is. A lot of times people will make their nose way too high. So there's the center here, and now that's the bottom of the nose. That's not the tip of the nose. The tip of the nose comes up higher. Now you can stop this video anytime as you go draw. I'm just going to go and crank it on out here. So then I'm going to divide that in half, that space in half, and see what major feature hits there. Now that's not necessarily the split in the mouth, as we'll see here. That's really the bottom of her mouth. Now her mouth is open too, so that causes a little more problem, but the bottom of her bottom lip is where that other half is. If she's closed, then maybe it's someplace else, and maybe in the bottom of the chin, or the middle of the chin, but usually it's the middle of the bottom lip. So now I've got kind of a roadmap of where everything is going to go. Okay. Then what I'm going to be looking for is I'm going to look for these eyes. I'm going to start sketching these eyes in. And the eye, let me get another sheet of paper here. The eye is really, and you're going to have to stop and look, and maybe you can blow this picture up when you are using as reference later on. The eye is basically has three different curves. It has a curve up here, then it goes across, and then down. Now you have to understand what's going on in the eye. The eye is really a big round circle. It's concentric circles. They're centered on the same center point. Then you have the iris, and then you have the pupil. And they all should be centered. But the eyelid covers this part up. Now, before we do that, there are muscles here that turn the eye. And they only get revealed except the only place they're revealed is closer to the nose. So this eyelid generally comes over here and covers up most of this white part and gets revealed right here in the corner. So that little red gooey stuff I always tell my students, and where it's a little moist, you know, they got a tear duct, but actually that's a little bit of the muscle still showing. So I have three different kind of curves here for the eye, and then the bottom is usually a little flatter. It's not a football shape. It's not symmetrical. Rarely is it anyway. And then if you notice a lot of times, remember what's underneath here. These are perfect circles, but a lot of times, this is where you need to look for the individual part. We don't see the top of the eye. The iris. The eyelid covers up the iris. And most of the time, the entire pupil is visible, but barely. The bottom of the iris comes and a lot of times hits this eyelid just barely. Rarely do you see a lot of white underneath. And rarely do you see the entire iris and the entire pupil. Something's a little bit wrong if that's the case, okay? Now you're going to look for a highlight in there as well, and sometimes they're round, sometimes they're rectangular. Sometimes if they took a picture with a photography umbrella, then there's umbrella shaped, and then a lot of times there's a secondary highlight in there. But you're going to look for this kind of angle. Now sometimes it's convex, sometimes it's concave. This depends. They're not straight like this, but I want you to look for those general shapes. And so when we go to draw those shapes in our on our head, That's what I kind of just map it out as to begin with. So let's flip it back over here. Now, how big do we make these? I just a lot of times generally make this little frowning face, and I've been drawn enough that I know this is the general idea. But look at yours. It's going to be individual, but generally, as a rule of thumb, is that we have a half an eye space on the sides of the face, and we could put a full eye in between. Now, so if you could put 3 or 4 eyes in between, then you either have these too small or too far apart, or both. But so I'm going to just roughly put this in, very light, just to give myself an idea. Okay, we haven't talked about other folds in or anything, but I want to get that general proportion down. I need to make sure that they're the same height and everything, but I definitely need to make sure that they're the right width, because the nose and the mouth are all based upon this. So let me show you here. The corner of the nose is going to determine, the corner of the eyes, or in this case kind of the red part of the eye, is going to determine how wide the nose is. Now, this line is just showing me how wide the most outer part of the nose is, not that's where I start shading, because you can see that the bridge of the nose is much more narrow. And then, just as a rule of thumb, you're going to look for these major and minor planes of the nose. And so what we're going to do is, remember the bottom of the nose comes to that center point. I'm going to draw kind of a trapezoid shape, and I'm going to do this really light because it's going to change. And then I have the nostril. So the nostril is similar to an eye, similar to a football, but the central axis is kind of angled up most of the time. Now, not all the time. Sometimes it's a little weirder shape, kind of comes up and goes more like this, where this is a really defined shape on the top, and then this is really kind of fuzzy down here. So you're going to have to just look and draw what you see, not necessarily from my my drawing here, because this is kind of a generic one. So I've got this trapezoid shape, I've got this kind of weird nostril hole shape, and then I have the flesh that goes around it. Now notice that the flesh, if I draw this quickly, the flesh is not equal spacing here. It's not centered on it. It is much more weighted to the top. It comes down and comes close to this nostril, but it's not, doesn't touch it. But there's a big difference in spacing here as it is here. So my nose is generally a trapezoid. Now they're going to be rounded off. I have a nostril hole and the fleshy part of the nostril. Okay. I'll show you the rest here. So there's the bottom. I know I can't come out any further than that, so I have to adjust my trapezoid to allow for this nostril, and then the fleshy part of that nostril. Then I can roughly put in the eyebrows, and these eyebrows are a little bit longer than their eye, and they have kind of 3 parts to it. They have this kind of head, then the brow itself, and then it kind of tails down to the bottom here. I'm just going to roughly put those out, but because that's going to give me, and everybody's brows are different. She's got some little bushier eyebrows, but if we notice, where does the nose start? It starts in the eyebrow area, not clear out here. Then there's this little bridge, there's another plane right here that the plane of the head kind of dips down, and then it comes back out. And in its roughest form here, that's the plane of the nose here. Now sometimes it curves in a little bit and then curves back out. So there's a minor plane there, but this is kind of the major plane. So you have a little ball on the end of the nose. Sometimes you have that little butt nose because if there's cartilage in there and there's two separate pieces of cartilage, some people have it really prominent, some people don't. So we really have this plane here, and then we really have a plane underneath the nose that's in shadow, but looks like a Texas Longhorn right now. But so you're going to need to be looking. You're also going to need to be looking for this other fold. Like on my eyes, you can't see that fold because I have a lot more fat up here and my eyelid droops down. But I'm just doing this really light, okay? And notice that the corner of the nose is as wide as the eyes. So if these eyes are too wide, then you're going to be yelling at me and saying, oh, Mr. Dreier didn't know what he was talking about because my nose is way too wide. And I would go back and say probably that your eyes are too wide. Then we talk about the mouth, and this is the bottom of the lip now. So we have to just kind of judge how wide or how much space there is between the nose and the top of the lip. But notice too that the pupil is important because the pupil is going to give us the idea of how wide that mouth should be. And so we have a couple different mouths here that you're going to need to look for. Sometimes it's a curve like this, and I usually start here and then work my way out because that's going to give me my center line, and I know my mouth's not going to be off center. So sometimes it's like that. Sometimes it's more vector here, more sharp. Then we have sometimes this is a curving out where it's curving up. Sometimes it curves down. Okay. Some ethnicities have a little more curve here than others. Some have thin upper lips, some have a little thicker upper lips. But it's basically an M that is with his legs stretched out. So it could be a curved M, or it could be like this. But you're looking for that. Now hers has not really a point right there. And then it's kind of a neutral until it gets here, and then it has a slight turn up, slightly. Now the top lip, now we have to think about the lips too. The lips are made up of really two main muscles, and that's what produces that dip. And then sometimes it has a little fleshiness right here. Sometimes it goes up, sometimes it goes down. You just have to look at what that line is doing. Sometimes I like to flip the whole page over. I'm going to give her a little bit of a fleshiness there, and then comes in here. Then we have a little split in the lips, and I think I maybe have that down a little bit too far. But the thickness of her lips, and generally the bottom lip is a little bit shorter than the top lip, so we don't want to come clear out to that corner. We're also going to look for this little triangle in here where the teeth it just kind of creates a shadow. That makes their teeth not look so broad. Okay. So these are just rough ideas. Now you have to draw specific. So I'd have to work on this because I think my measurement is off, but I'm looking for those general proportions. Then I'm going to I have things pretty much in the right place. Then I'm gonna have to define it because nobody's this round. Okay, so it's kind of hard to see. Let me see if I can go back to without the lines. Okay, so now we have to look at her jawline. Her jawline is coming in this way toward her chin. Her chin is a lot of times about the width of the nose. So somewhere in there. This comes sometimes straight down, sometimes it's angled, but we know we can't come out too much wider than this. If it's a little too wide here, then we can adjust it. But now you have to be careful with the eyeshadow. The eyeshadow kind of tricks you into thinking that there's not as much room as there is. But you really have three main lines here. We have, by and large, it comes down. Let's say that the mouth is right here. The mouth, it comes straight down until it comes basically to the corner of the mouth. Then the nose is here. Okay. And the chin is about as wide as the nose. And then it angles in toward the chin. So we have 1, 2, 3 main curves here. Okay, that's something to look for. Now, hers is not really super pronounced, but it does come in, and then maybe a little closer to the bottom of the lip, it comes in a little more severe. The bottom of the lip. Now this is a good time to turn it upside down to see if these two are symmetrical. And sometimes, just for point of reference, I'll pull in a little bit of her neck to see. And I'm just looking at that corner of the jaw. Okay, so it still looks like a cone head at the moment. Now we got to think about where the ears are. The ears come up to kind of basically the bottom of the eyebrows, and maybe right about the tip of the nose. And we're just gonna, if you make them really wide, then they're gonna look like they're too big. Just gonna roughly put those in. Okay. Now for an ear, kind of three things going on, and now she has a little kind of atypical ears, but there's a short curve, there's a long curve, and then there's the earlobe. Then we have this line that just kind of comes up and gets that fleshy part of the ear. Then you have where people pierce their, what is it? I'm not sure what that is called. I should know that. And then you have a little dip here, and then you have another line. So you're looking for these curves, but you're basically with 1, 2, 3 different curves. Now those all manifest themselves all different. Some of them come in, some of them come out, but you're looking for those because that's kind of the generic person. You have to figure out how that deviates from the generic person. So yeah, I can kind of see that this has a little bit of a, here her thing comes out that way. You have another curve here. So I would work on that a little bit later. But now I have to think about, where does the hairline come down? So sometimes it's, if I divide from here to here in half, from that top of the eye, and divide it in thirds, that's kind of a rough idea of where the hairline is, but that varies tremendously. So I'm just going to try that. And now her sideburns come down a little bit below her ear. And then we have the part. Now remember that where we measured was at the top of her hairline, not the top of her forehead. So if you start the hairline right here and go up, then she's going to have way too much forehead. And I have to kind of think about, this is kind of dark hair, so it's kind of hard to tell how it's being combed, but hair continues to come out. And then about her chin level, it kind of branches out again. I think she's a little stocky here, so I probably need to thin her out a little bit. But okay, it's getting there, getting closer. So what we want to make it is we want to make it look human on this first time. Okay, it may not. I think it may not exactly look like her, but I want it to be human. So everybody can make it human by putting things in the right proportion. Now, maybe you won't be able to see all those little subtleties and changes, but you should be able to make this reasonably human-esque by putting and following some of these guidelines of where everything go. Okay, so then after that, we would start to put some more details in. I start to eliminate some of these guidelines so that we don't have them, and if we wanted to start shading, we can. So one of the specific things is we'll just stop right there, and then I'll start to shade on the next video. Okay, but I would say that probably we're looking pretty good, except maybe we can thin this whole face down. I might work on that a little bit off camera. I would also probably in my computer I will flip it upside down and look at it, see if it's symmetrical. I can see that this jawline is not exactly symmetrical, but again, still drawing super light. I would want to check the length of the eyes to see if they're all basically the same too. I can turn it on its side to see how they're lining up. So those are the things that I'm going to be doing kind of off screen right now. But that's how we break it down. We break it down and find out what object or what feature is dead center. It might be on yours, it might be the center of the eyes, might be the lower part of the eyes. Most generally, it's probably the top of the eyes. Divide that in half. That's generally at the bottom of the nose, but it might be the tip of the nose. You're going to have to check yours. Cut that in half, and that is sometimes the middle of the bottom lip, sometimes at the top of the bottom lip, sometimes at the bottom of the bottom lip. So you're going to be looking for that. Where do the ears go? And this one, a lot of times I say that it comes from the top of the eyes to the bottom of the ears, but that's kind of depends on where the camera angle is. Okay, so you're going to be looking for all that. Now she has, and you have to be kind of careful with this, she does have these kind of little smile lines, and there's a little line here to define her cheekbones. She has really prominent cheeks. Guys, you can get away with a little more aggressiveness on this line. Girls tends to make them look a lot older, and I know that there's going to be a little shadow where the chin protrudes. So, okay, that's all I'm going to do for right now. I'll come back with the next video in a second.